Carthage must be destroyed. We are going to base this model today in the life of a miniature. So we painted him up, he was done. We got him to we did layering and highlighting last time. So now what we're gonna work on is doing his base, that texture and stuff, as well as I like to color in the rim here with a color. People that usually do painting, well, I don't know if it's true, but some people might varnish the model first before putting on before putting on the base. I personally like to base it first and then varnish the model. That's just in case I, get any mistakes or put any of the basing material I use on his feet where it's not supposed to be, and that's just for me to help me correct it. Now, with this model here, I'm going to be using straight up what's called AK Terrain's Sandy Desert acrylic paint. It's a texture paint, and I just dab it on the base around his feet, below his body, and it'll dry and harden into a texture, a sand-like texture. It's a bit of a red color. I think that's good for Afghanistan and my wand in particular, what I'm doing. There's all sorts of texture paints people like to use. There's Citadel's texture paint. I find this stuff is actually not my favorite. I prefer AK-47. AK's dries really fast. In comparison, I think it sits better, and this is really expensive for this little pot. I think this pot is worth like half of this, and you get way more with AK. So I recommend AK 100%. They got tons of different terrain. Another one is Vallejo. Now I don't have proper basing. This is just a thick mud brown effect, but Vallejo is another company that would allow you to do some texture painting. This is a weather effect. It's not a proper base texture. And then some people just do the old-fashioned, glue sand onto the base. Gluing sand on the base takes a lot longer, and I used to do that on models, but I found that texture paint is just faster and still looks good to me when you put grass and stuff on it. So this set of models that I'm doing right now doesn't require a whole lot of work with the bases itself. What I will do is I will apply this texture paint onto his base here, and what I'll use is I'll use an older brush, because you don't want to use a fancy brush for this. This actually doesn't even have any bristles left in it. It's just basically now a stick, because I've used it for basing so much. But there's other tools out there to apply a basing texture. I just dab it on and move mine around. But some people have like spatulas and fancy stuff to base with. But yeah, you can see, just take it out of the pot and start dab some on, and I push it around and just fill it up. Now, I always have to be careful when I'm putting this on, because when I'm pushing it, I don't want to get too close to his skin or get it on his skin. I don't want that. So now this is AK's Sandy Desert, and they say on the side here that it's redder. It's more red. I don't know if redder's a word. This is redder, must be a word. And they say it's a little different than their desert sand. So this is Sandy Desert, so it's got a bit more rocky texture to it, where they also have a dune-like sand, which is very yellow. And I tried to put the yellow on these guys originally, but it was just too bright in my opinion. So I mix them on my models sometimes. I put some patches of yellow, and then I put some patches of, or a majority of this stuff over top of it. But for this guy, I'm just gonna put on the sandy color. But yeah, when used together, the AK Sandy Desert and their other desert really has some cool effects. They have some great tutorials on their YouTube stuff and their websites, and I'm not using this to any fancy extreme here. I'm just taking it and dabbing it around and flattening it essentially to make my own quick look. But there's so many techniques that I've seen people do and work with on dioramas that just look great. But for basic wargaming, and where I want a base that looks believable, but I don't want to, it's not diorama level. So if I was doing some terrain, perhaps I'd do a bit more steps. but for this particular thing, I'm just, I'm just gonna put this on it, let it dry, and base coat it. So some of this stuff I'll have to get closer to my own face to see, because I'm not comfortable being so far away from my miniature and pushing this stuff around. So I'm gonna fill the rest of this up off camera and then show you the results. So I've got all of the, I'm gonna change the camera here, get a better shot here, but I got all that AK sandy desert paste on there. It's gonna dry, and I find that this stuff, out of all the texture paint that I've ever used, dries the fastest. So not only do you get a really good amount for the price it's worth, I think I paid 19 Canadian for that, 19 Canadian for that one there. Not only that, but it dries insanely fast compared to the other ones. Now, when this does dry, I'm just gonna be dry brushing it because I already like the color. I just like to lighten it a bit, but once this dries, you can also add a wash to it, make it more grimy if you want to. But for the desert scenes, all I do is I just simply dry brush over it with some pale sand from Vallejo. Now, I'm not gonna do it to this guy, but when it dries, sometimes I will also add, what's it called? Grass tufts or some stones or something like that. For stones, I usually just use real stones and then paint over them, and then grass tufts and sometimes static grass. For the desert guys, on these ones, I haven't really been adding a whole lot yet. I might later after I keep working with them, but otherwise, even just like this, after it just dried and dry brush is good enough for me. So I'm going to go let this dry, and while it's drying, I'm gonna work on another model that needs some touch-ups, and then we'll go on to the dry brushing of the base here in a bit. Okay, so you can see here that his base is done, it's dried. I wait about an hour with this stuff, and I find after an hour it's really good. And just to be safe, maybe wait a couple. You never know, something underlying might not be totally dry, but you can see the AK stuff here has given a nice texture. Now, what some people might do is they might think it's sand or it's dirt, and they'll give it a wash, but I already think it's already dark enough, and actually, just as it is on its own, looks pretty convincing already for sand. So what I just do, what I like to do is that I just like to take some pale sand and dry brush it over top of this AK stuff. I think it just adds a little bit of an extra texture, a little bit of an extra pop, and makes it more convincing for sand. And that's what all I've been doing for these Afghan warriors. I think it looks good for desert, simple, quick. As I said, I'm not gonna add any rocks or anything like that. I'm gonna put a little too much paint on my palette, but that's okay. I'm not gonna add it to this guy. I think I'll probably just leave it too. I'm just gonna off camera here, just get my dry brush ready. Brush a bit on my hand there. I got a bit of a, I think this one's a little too big for this, but I don't have another good brush right now. Oh, that's too much, that's too much. See, I put too much, you can see it streaking like that. That means that I didn't dry it off enough, but that's okay. I might be putting a bush on this guy after all. See, I'm going a bit too heavy on there, but actually, it's gonna turn out still like okay, I think. So that's what you gotta be careful. I often do this when I dry brush. I go a little too heavy thinking it's ready, but it simply isn't. So it's funny, such a simple technique like dry brushing, I still have some issues with, and it's not a hard technique. It's supposed to be like one of the most basic techniques. And yet, somehow I still manage to botch it up from time to time. Just make sure that's on the camera there. Now at this phase, if I get a little bit of white on his feet, I don't really mind so much because I just represent it as sand. But just get in there. Make sure that you dry brush every so often. And it doesn't look that bad even after you dry brush. It just looks like that patch of dirt is a little more white than the rest. So let's get in here a bit more. And if it's a little uneven, that's okay. I'm just gonna look up close to make sure I got it. Okay, so that's my dry brush in there, and you can see that just adding that pale sand on top of the AK sandy desert, it really made it pop and stand out. And it's not so bad on the spot I over dry brush. It'll be fine. I'm okay with that. And you know, I can always put a plant on it later. So now he's almost done. All I need to do now is, and I can do this right now, is pop off the base, or paper, not pop off the base, but pop him off of his handle there. That's the word I'm trying to find. And just paint the ring around, or the rim around the base there, because it's gray right now. And a lot of people love to do this with goblin green in the past. I'm not gonna do that for this. I'm gonna use Karak stone here. It's a very it's a stone-like color, and I think it matches the desert fairly well. And yeah, that's what I'm gonna do here off camera. I just pop him off his handle here, because obviously I can't get on there. And then I'm just gonna, you know, paint it on the base here. I'm gonna have to get a better brush for this as well, but I'm gonna work on that, and then when it's done, I'll show you the end result. And there he is. This guy is now pretty much done. I did a little bit better dry brushing with a smaller, better brush in his base there, so hopefully it's popping a lot better. And I had to double layer that Karak stone on the base's edge there, because it doesn't have great coverage, but once you double coat it, it looks good and blends in well. So this guy's basically done. All I would have to do is, well, all I do have to do is varnish him. But I'll let him sit around for a bit first, because I haven't actually varnished any of my Afghans yet. I'm not sure how I want to varnish them, but I will do it in an upcoming video to end this series, and then basically the life of a miniature is over. But yeah, there he is. I'm gonna say right now, and I'll zoom in here, that you see here between his arms, it's not the most natural looking thing with that those weird unfinished gaps that I didn't really paint. From a distance, I'll pull them back here, it doesn't really matter. But I do have to do a lot more work on filling up those arms, I think, between the bodies. But you know what? He still looks good. He looks fine. And yeah, he's ready to fight off some English or some Indians from the British Army. So yeah, thank you for watching, and this was the basing video. Next time we'll do the varnish. So we'll see you next time. Have a good one.